fun one because I'm kind of looking forward to it from a betting perspective, but it's also interesting because 20 years ago, I feel like these two teams are on the same playing field, the same level, and the programs have kind of taken different paths since then, and that's Nebraska and Oklahoma. The reports were that Nebraska didn't want to play this game. I don't know how true those were, but it makes sense, right? Because Oklahoma's a powerhouse. They're 22.5-point favorites, 61.5 for a total. Now, Rob, I want to get on the same page here with an opener because I'm seeing a few different numbers. What do you have for an opener?
I showed it opening as OU 21.5 with a total of 60.5.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was looking on Vegas Insider and then OddsShark, and I saw like two different numbers. So I saw like a 64 and a 23 for 23.5 as an opener. So maybe that information is incorrect. But yeah, I wanted to first discuss that because that kind of changes what we expect from a line move, right?
Yeah, and I think that some of the offshores that open real early, Ben, don't accept a lot of money. So it's very possible 23 and 64 were openers, but when $500 moves the line,
What does that say? Yeah.
yeah, so it basically you're looking for a shop that takes a lot of money when they open, and
Mm-hmm.
I show like I say, what I use 21.5 and 60.5. It's bumped up since then. I'm showing 22, even some 22.5s and 61.5 right now.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the total first and foremost because I initially had a lean towards the over, but I know that you were on that Nebraska team last week. Is this a little bit of how well they played on defense? Maybe why we're not seeing this total shoot up?
Well, I'll say this: the very first, and again, I'm one of those guys. I think I've told you before. I put everything pen to paper, so I've got these notes written in front of me. And the first note for your show here on this game is that it's a major, three majors I have written here. Step up in class for the Nebraska defense. Right, their
Yes.
numbers look pretty gaudy right now. However, it was Illinois in their first game under
And
Brett
Illinois
Bielema.
looked bad.
Yeah, Illinois is not a good offense by
Yeah.
any stretch, and Brett Bielema is a conservative head coach. They played FCS Fordham, who a few years ago with Joe Moorhead throwing it around a lot was decent, but not anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
then last week it was Buffalo, and as I described to you, Buffalo had no problem handing off all game long. So they have seen nothing, even remotely close to the explosiveness of Oklahoma. They haven't seen Spencer Rattler, Kennedy Brooks, Marvin Mims, any of these, and the Oklahoma offensive line. Let's add
Yeah.
that in because these games are won in the trenches. And will Nebraska stand up? They look pretty good first three on both sides of the line, but this is a different deal when you're facing this offensive line. To their benefit, Adrian Martinez is just a handful. I mean, he becomes a one-man band at times for this team. I don't know whatever happened to the Scott Frost Central Florida offense, but we're not seeing it at Nebraska right now. Adrian Martinez happens to lead this team in rushing, yardage, and yards per carry. And I want to point that out only because he could be a handful for Oklahoma. 2 weeks ago when Oklahoma barely got by Tulane,
Mm-hmm.
40-35, right? Michael Pratt, the quarterback for Tulane, who is a dual threat, but he's not on Adrian Martinez's running level. But Michael Pratt ran it 11 times for 81 yards if I weed out the sack yardage, right? And gained 7.4
He
per
needed
attempt.
82, and they might have won that game.
Yeah, they might. That's right. If they get the 13
Yeah.
yards for a first down, they could have gone in to win that game. So, yeah, Michael Pratt did pretty good damage to Oklahoma. Had a 28-yard run, was his longest. So Martinez certainly could. His accuracy, Martinez, it's still in question. His numbers show 62.2% completions, but when you watch him up close, some balls are beautifully thrown, some are miserably inaccurate. Here's the real key here, Ben, and I kind of like the over, but I'm sitting on this. We're doing this a little early in the week. We're going to check some injury situations here. But Samori Torre from Montana, the FCS transfer at wide receiver,
Yeah.
is a FBS top-level talent at wide receiver. And Oklahoma is going to go into this game without their top corner, Woody Washington,
Ooh.
out of this game. And
Yeah.
they're also possibly missing their top nickelback slot corner, so to speak.
Hmm.
So they could be without two real good pieces, and we know Oklahoma's weak pass defense anyway. So there's a chance for Nebraska to take advantage, but I'll preface it by saying they've got cluster injuries in that wide receiver tight end group, their receiver group that aren't really defined yet. Not a lot of outs. Austin Allen, their top tight end, he's got a concussion. We'll see if he clears protocol. But then their number 2 and number 3 guys, Oliver Martin and Omar Manning, neither played last week, and both are kind of foggy about this week. But if they play, I would think Nebraska can give Oklahoma a lot of trouble through the air in this
Hmm.
game, and which would lead me to play over is probably bottom line, because I think Oklahoma is going to get theirs. If Nebraska can come back and get theirs, and Oklahoma's been vulnerable defensively, let's face it. So we'll see. I think injuries will speak a lot to how we play this game. But right now, I am, like you said earlier, I'm leaning toward over as well.
Yeah, my lean's the over too, and for a few reasons. As you mentioned, on the outside, yeah, Nebraska has an advantage there, and that receiver from Montana, he might actually have a chance to be drafted. Like they've been saying he's a really, really good talent, and he's kind of been overshadowed by just Nebraska's program as a whole this year. Even though they're 2-1, but it's a 2-1 that I think has an asterisk on it, right? Who have they beaten, and how did they look against Illinois? So they come into this one. I'm certainly leaning on the over too, because I can see in the fourth quarter, maybe even the second half as a whole, Nebraska gets a few touchdowns in that prevent defense. Now, as far as the spread goes, 22, 21, what was it again? I've lost it here. 22 currently, right?
Yeah, we're sitting around 22 right now.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's sitting in that range where you could see Oklahoma being up by 4 scores, and then Nebraska gets a cheap one. So I'm not going to have any interest on the side. What about you?
I'm kind of with you because I think that there is still, albeit an older rivalry, right? This used to be one of the biggest rivalries in college football. If I go back to my younger days in the Big Eight and stuff like that, this used to really be a game that everybody looked forward to. They haven't really played it much since then, but I do think that history probably is dredged up this week for both teams. And I think Nebraska is going to give you their best shot because Nebraska has a lot to prove. If they were ever to pull this game out, Ben, that takes Scott Frost not only off a hot seat, but puts him on a pretty good seat if he can win this game.
That hands down be his biggest win. Not even close.
Right?
Like we're talking here, and then his second one. I don't even know. Hands down would be his biggest win. And it's funny you say that about this rivalry, because my dad went to Nebraska. He told me all the stories back in the 80s of these two teams. Like it was must-watch TV. And now you're getting like an early spot. It's not a primetime game. And Fox is – I don't know if you saw the trailers yet for this, but they're trying to hype it up, and they're trying to cater to more the older generation, because, yeah, they know what that rivalry means, but the kids playing – they don't have any clue other than what Frost and maybe some of the other coaches are telling them. So it's going to be really interesting to see these two teams play.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that they're in different conferences now, they never see each other. Motivationally, Lincoln Riley or Scott Frost both have to do their job here. I think if you're Scott Frost and you see what happened yesterday to Clay Helton, that could happen to you if you lose by 35 here. So
Yeah.
there's every reason to get this team fired up. But I'm sure Nebraska's players, the underdog always likes the big stage. I think Oklahoma probably views Nebraska as a little mosquito that they can swat away. But sometimes
A
you do
look
that.
ahead spot.
Yeah, you
Oklahoma,
get challenged.
they don't have Texas isn't a few, right? Who do they have after this? Texas.
Uh,
Now they
you
play
see?
that game late. Yeah, that's right. Oh,
That's
West
usually
Virginia.
in October.
Yeah, West Virginia. Okay.
Okay, so that's a conference game. Is it a home game or in
It is a
Morgantown?
home game. Yeah, so they get 2 home games back to back.
Um, yeah, we'll
Actually,
see.
4. They've only played home games. Yeah.
It's crazy. They'll have something to prove because the only time they've played an FBS team, we'll throw that 76 to nothing against Western Carolina in the garbage from last week. That's
Yeah.
a mismatch and a half. But the game against Tulane raised eyebrows again from people who thought Oklahoma could seriously challenge for a Final Four playoff berth, and then they come out and only beat Tulane by 5 and like as you mentioned at the end of that game, a Tulane
Yeah.
first down, they fall 1 yard short. That inning could have been very, very different. So I think they'll both be motivated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a fun one. Early start time. It's going to be a good one to